Sally had been working as a dishwasher for 2 months and had quickly gotten used to the restaurant's routine. This work involved tough hours and increased workload on the days when celebrations were held at the restaurant. The only thing she couldn't get used to was the never-ending criticism of the owner's fiancé. Monica was an arrogant woman who only cared about her looks and believed that she was the center of the universe. She disliked Sally from day one and did everything she could to make the dishwasher feel uncomfortable. It was Monica who accused Sally of stealing money from the cash register, although the woman didn't leave the kitchen that day and simply couldn't have stolen the cash. But the owner's fiancé didn't seem to care about that fact in the least. "You're a petty liar and a thief. People like you always look for a way to get into someone else's pocket. Just wait until I tell Jonathan about this. He's definitely going to fire you," Monica shouted. Fortunately, the restaurant was very busy that day, and the horrible woman simply didn't have the time to complain to her fiancé. Jonathan Parker got the restaurant from his father, who had recently retired and was enjoying his rest and having a successful career in business. Nevertheless, Ben Parker checked in on his only son from time to time and helped him with advice if there was a need for it. Jonathan was born when the businessman was over 40 years old, and the birth of his son completely changed his life. Ben worked tirelessly to ensure that his sole heir had everything he needed. Despite the fact that the businessman achieved his goal, he still continued to help Jonathan in all of his endeavors. And now, when the son came to Mr. Parker for advice, he listened attentively. "Dad, I can't figure out why the restaurant is losing money. Moreover, someone has been stealing money from the cash register. Monica says that it's the new dishwasher, Sally, I think. But I personally hired her, and I don't believe that she could be stealing. I have no idea what to do," Jonathan said, puzzled. Ben Parker looked at his son carefully and then thought for a minute or two. He wrinkled his forehead, thinking over all the options he could help his son. Finally, the face of the elderly businessman relaxed and his eyes sparkled. "Everything will be fine, son. But first, you need to unwind and get a change of scenery. You should attend the annual Forum of Restaurateurs in New York. You wanted to do it for a long time," Ben Parker suggested. Jonathan raised his eyebrow in surprise. "I would love to go, Dad, but who will run the restaurant in my absence? You're already retired, and I can't really afford to hire someone for the job right now." But Ben Parker had an answer already. "Why would you need to hire anyone? It seems that your fiancée Monica would be perfectly fine taking over the job for a bit, especially since she often comes to the restaurant and knows the staff." Jonathan looked at his father again, thinking that he was joking. But the businessman was quite serious. He really did think that putting Monica in charge was a good idea. "Well, it might be a good idea. She definitely has some potential. I hope nothing serious will happen while I'm away," the young businessman answered and went to book his tickets. Having learned about her fiancé's business trip, Monica had a disgruntled face and pursed her lips touchily. "Well, you're going to New York, and I have to take care of the restaurant, where everyone's constantly trying to deceive me or steal something," the woman said, pretending to be irritated. "Honey, I will only be gone for 3 days. Try not to fire anyone during this time, okay? And don't rush to any conclusions. Maybe Sally isn't responsible for any of the restaurant's problems," the young businessman replied. Monica snorted and went into another room. Realizing that the evening was hopelessly ruined, Jonathan started packing for the trip. And the very next morning, the restaurant was in for some radical changes. Taking over its management, Monica established very strict rules on the restaurant. Now, the waiters had to give her most of their tips at the end of the day. Moreover, she cut the money allocated for the purchase of ingredients in half, which meant that the quality of food would worsen. Looking at each other in fear, the restaurant staff lowered their heads and got to work. Sally was the only one who didn't get affected by the changes. She still had to clean mountains of dirty dishes and deal with the sea of foam that was born in the process. After washing the first batch of dishes, the woman took a bag of waste outside. But as she approached the trash can, Sally came face to face with an elderly homeless man who was staring at her with hungry eyes. "What's in your bag, honey? Is there anything edible there?" "I haven't eaten anything since yesterday," the man asked cautiously. Sally looked pitifully at the homeless man and shook her head. Sadness and disappointment immediately filled the man's eyes. The dishwasher thought for a moment and then said, "Wait here, sir. I'll bring you something from the kitchen. I have money, so I'll pay for your lunch." The elderly man smiled and looked gratefully at the young woman. A few minutes later, Sally brought out a serving of hot soup and some fries too. "Here, take it. Don't worry, I paid for everything. They're strict about these things at our restaurant," the woman added. The homeless man looked at Sally with warmth and started eating right there on the bench. Sally was about to leave when the old man asked, "What's it like working there? Does the owner treat the staff well? I heard that he doesn't pay much, but it's very demanding and unreasonable." Sally stopped and answered rather empathetically, "No, it's not true. Mr. Parker is a good man and a great manager, but his fiancée is very different. Excuse me, sir, but I have to go back to work. Please leave the tray in the back room. I'll pick it up later." The homeless man nodded and thanked the woman for her kindness. Having finished his meal, he took the tray and headed for the back room. At that moment, Monica came outside, accompanied by a handsome young waiter. Unaware of the homeless man's presence, the waiter pulled his mistress in for a passionate kiss. Monica's cheeks flushed and she recoiled in fear. "Sam, not here. What if someone sees us? They could tell Jonathan. Be patient. I'll see you tonight, and behave yourself in public." But the waiter didn't stop and continued his courtship. Then he looked at the woman in the eyes and asked, "Can you give me some more money? I want to get a new phone, but the payday isn't soon enough. And that fool Jonathan went on a business trip too." Meanwhile, the homeless man hid behind a tree, still holding the tray, and listened in on the conversation. "No, Sam, at least not today. Jonathan already noticed that someone took cash out of the register. I'm going to blame it on that dishwasher Sally, but that won't solve the problem. Although he should have fired her a long time ago anyway," Monica answered. The homeless man was so surprised by what he'd heard that he accidentally dropped the tray, which fell down with a loud noise, thus revealing his presence. Monica immediately turned her head and saw the homeless man in front of her. "What are you doing here? Spying? And why are you holding a tray from our kitchen? Is this the dishwasher's doing again? We have a high-end restaurant here, not a soup kitchen," the woman exclaimed and threw an evil look in the direction of the homeless man. Then she went back into the restaurant and headed straight for the kitchen. "You're fired, you filthy dishwasher. Don't ever come back here. You have 1 hour to get your stuff and get out of here," Monica screamed. Sally shuddered and looked at the woman. "Don't kick me out, ma'am, please. You know I'm saving up for my son's surgery," the woman whispered with tears in her eyes. But there was no stopping Monica. She didn't calm down until she personally put Sally out the door. The woman took one last look at the restaurant and headed home. Suddenly, the homeless man called out for Sally, the one she gave food to earlier that day. "Wait a second, dear. What happened? Why are you crying?" the homeless man asked with compassion in his voice. Sally shook her head ruefully and then answered, "I got fired, but I tried so hard. My son Billy needs surgery. I'm a single mother. My husband died in a car accident 3 years ago." Billy was in the back seat at the time of the accident, but fortunately he survived. But he developed a limp because his leg got jammed in the mangled door. The old man looked at the woman sympathetically and touched her shoulder gently. "Don't worry, Sally. Everything will work out. There are many good people in this world," the homeless man said in parting. Sally didn't pay much attention to the man's words at the time and forgot about them in a couple of minutes. Of course, Sally didn't know that the homeless man wasn't joking and was determined to solve her problem in the most radical way. The next morning, the elderly man came into the restaurant manager's office. "What do you want?" "I said I was busy." Monica grumbled indignantly. She looked up and saw standing in front of her was the same homeless man who got the dishwasher Sally fired the day before. "What do you want? And who gave you the right to burst into my office like that? I'm going to call security, and you'll be thrown out into the street in no time," Monica said as she reached for the phone. The man smiled somewhat strangely and then answered, "I'm here because I own this office, as well as the restaurant itself. I'm Ben Parker, young lady. According to all the documents, this restaurant is still my property." Monica was so surprised she opened her mouth and froze. Meanwhile, the homeless man took off his wig and threw off his rags, revealing the business suit he was wearing underneath. Then he wiped the makeup off his face with the damp cloth and looked at Monica. It really was Ben Parker, and he pointed his finger at the door. "I won't let you cheat on my son and steal his money. You can forget about him and get lost. And don't forget to take your lover with you, the waiter, and let him know that he's fired too," the elderly businessman added. Monica's face changed immediately, but she did as she was told and quickly left the restaurant. She didn't know it yet, but Ben Parker called his son the night before and told him everything. The elderly businessman deliberately created favorable conditions for the thief, so he could dress up as a homeless person and figure out what was going on. Now, Ben Parker intended to restore justice and give Sally her job back. Moreover, the businessman called one of the best clinics specializing in injuries of the musculoskeletal system and arranged for little Billy to get his surgery there. Ben Parker also took care of all the expenses associated with the surgery and subsequent rehabilitation. When Sally found out that she could go back to work at the restaurant, her joy knew no bounds. She couldn't have known that the homeless man she met by the trash cans would turn out to be the owner of the restaurant. But that isn't all, Sally. You will come back to the restaurant, but not as a dishwasher. From now on, you'll be an administrator. I think it's time for you to move up the career ladder, and my son and I will help you do it," Mr. Parker added, smiling. Sally felt that she was living in some kind of a fairy tale, but it was actually all real. Jonathan soon returned from his business trip and approved of his father's decision. The young businessman personally took little Billy to the clinic, where he underwent surgery the very next day. All this time, Sally was right by her son's side and couldn't stop thanking God for sending her Jonathan. During Billy's treatment, the young people became friends and realized that they really enjoyed each other's company. Of course, it was too early to talk about anything serious, but Ben Parker could feel that there definitely would be a wedding in the future. Spending his days with Sally and her son, Jonathan realized that this was the kind of relationship he dreamed of all of his life. Monica, on the other hand, thought only about getting rich and never really loved him. About 6 months later, Sally and Jonathan did get married, and their son Billy danced at their wedding. As for Ben Parker, he's delighted that his son found family happiness, which turned out to have been waiting for him in the restaurant's back room, and not in some nightclub.